Welcome back to the Restricted Handling Daily Intel Brief. This is what's been going on in Iran and the Middle East in the past 24 hours. Iran has put Mohsen Rezaei, a veteran Revolutionary Guards commander, at the center of its security and foreign policy machinery. President Masoud Pezeshkian appointed him Secretary of the Supreme National Security Council after Mohammad Bagher Zolkadr stepped down. Supreme Leader Mojtaba Khamenei also made Rezaei his representative on the council and moved Zolkadr into a political advisor role. That is a formal change in decision authority during negotiations over the Strait of Hormuz, confrontation with the U.S. and Israel, and pressure across Iran's regional network. Rezaei commanded the Revolutionary Guards from 1981 to 1997 and later spent more than 2 decades at the Expediency Discernment Council. His appointment does not automatically mean Iran is choosing escalation. It does mean the council now has a secretary with deep military credentials, an independent political profile, and a direct line to the supreme leader. Official messaging praised his strategic outlook and revolutionary commitment. The emphasis was continuity, discipline, and experienced control at a moment when Iran cannot afford competing signals from the military, diplomats, and political leadership. That matters immediately in Hormuz. Iran and Oman say they have an understanding on a safe navigation route, but they are still negotiating monitoring, maritime services, environmental cooperation, and crime control. Iran has even raised compensation for services. The key distinction is that a route agreement does not equal full reopening. Tehran says the waterway cannot return to normal while the U.S. maritime blockade continues, and while its broader demands remain unmet. Those demands include an end to attacks and threats, sanctions relief, access to frozen assets, and compensation. Iran is trying to turn a technical channel into durable strategic leverage. A controlled route can reduce the immediate risk of a complete energy shock while preserving Tehran's ability to screen vessels, impose conditions, and deny that the old rules have returned. The hard questions are practical. Who monitors passage? Which ships receive permission? What fees apply? How are U.S.-linked vessels treated? If those answers favor Iranian discretion, commercial traffic may resume without the strait becoming predictably open. A second major change is the Mecca Joint Defense Agreement among Saudi Arabia, Turkey, and Pakistan. The three governments say an attack on one will be treated as an attack on all. They plan recurring foreign and defense consultations, a permanent secretariat in Saudi Arabia, and possible expansion to new members. Pakistan brings nuclear status and combat experience. Turkey brings a large military, NATO membership, and an expanding defense industry. Saudi Arabia brings money, geography, and political weight. All three insist the pact is defensive and not aimed at Iran. Tehran publicly said it had no reason to fear an inclusive regional framework that identifies the correct threats. That reassurance should not be mistaken for indifference. The pact gives Riyadh another security option beyond bilateral U.S. guarantees. It also raises questions nobody has answered publicly. Does nuclear consultation exist? Who decides whether an incident qualifies as an attack on all? What happens if the attacker is an Iranian partner or proxy? How does Turkey reconcile collective action with its other regional relationships? The first credibility test came almost at once. The Houthis claimed a drone strike on Saudi Aramco's Jazan refinery, where a fire was extinguished without reported injuries. They also attacked the Yemeni port of Mecca, with local authorities reporting deaths and injuries. The timing forces Turkey and Pakistan to decide whether the new promise produces visible support. Intelligence sharing, air defense assistance, and diplomatic backing would show activation without starting a larger war. Silence would narrow the deterrent value of the pact before its institutions are even built. The attacks also connect both ends of the energy map. Saudi Arabia has relied heavily on the Red Sea as an alternative, while Hormuz remains restricted. Pressure on Jazan and Mecca places that corridor at risk, too. Oil prices stayed relatively steady because emergency releases and softer Chinese demand offset some geopolitical fear, but shipping and insurance costs can remain elevated even after a technical Hormuz statement. Traders are looking at a route mechanism, a new Iranian security chief, a collective defense pact, and fresh proxy attacks, all at the same time. That is conditional relief, not a return to normal. In Gaza, Benjamin Netanyahu publicly rejected the latest U.S.-led 15-point plan. He says Israeli forces will not withdraw until Hamas is fully disarmed. Hamas has accepted transferring weapons under a new administration in principle, but says Israeli strikes must stop and withdrawal must begin first. The dispute is about who gives up leverage first. Without a shared verification sequence, partial weapons handovers and partial withdrawals become invitations for each side to accuse the other of cheating. Netanyahu also faces an October election and pressure from hardline coalition partners, while Washington wants a visible transition toward post-war governance. Syria added another strategic change by taking back civilian control at Hmeimim Airport and the commercial portion of Tartus from Russia. The military sections will become joint training centers. President Ahmad al-Sharaa gains sovereignty without expelling Moscow, and Russia keeps a relationship without the autonomy it enjoyed under Bashar al-Assad. For Iran, that is another reduction in the old support architecture that connected Tehran, Assad, and Moscow across Syria. For Turkey, Israel, and Arab governments, it creates room to compete over Syria's next alignment. Iranian domestic messaging tied these developments into one story of controlled resistance. Hormuz was presented as a sovereign instrument, with the foreign ministry saying the country remains in a state of war. Rezaei's appointment was framed as experienced leadership. The Saudi-Turkish-Pakistani Pact was welcomed only if it treats Israel as the central threat. Gaza casualties appeared alongside leadership and maritime coverage, joining domestic authority, regional security, and the Palestinian cause in one confrontation. That information frame gives Tehran flexibility. Negotiations can proceed, but every concession can still be described as a disciplined use of power rather than retreat. That's all for today. Be good to one another, keep your critical thinking switched on, and remember, powerful people can survive a little scrutiny. Find the Daily Brief at restrictedhandling.substack.com.